Python programming gives you the opportunity to reduce your code complexity through Python iterators. If an object has values which can be traversed upon, that object is an iterable. The process of traversing through the objects or the elements in that object is called iterating. Python iteration saves you writing complex codes, saves your code complexity, and also code redundancy. In today's video, we'll be exploring Python iterators with little examples. Stick around. And here we have a Jupyter notebook where we've created another project called Python iterators. Now, to iterate through a basic loop, for example, an air loop, what do we do? Now, there are two basic methods that are implemented in Python iterators. One of them is what we call the iter method. Now, if you're going to iterate through this, it means you'll be going through air, iterating through air, and we can store this into some variable x, and we can just go with the next of x, and after which we can choose to print this value. Now let's run this and first see what we get. See, we get airplane as the first value. Let's go with, if we print more than one value and then we choose to run it, you see we get airplane, jet, and rocket. So currently this iter model, this iter method here has iterated through this loop, iterated through this list air, and stored the value in x. So now when we use the next method also gives you the next value in the iterator, okay? So if we add one more next, let's just add one more to this, and when you run it, you see it gives you the next value, which is helicopter. Let's take out two of these values and just leave it at 2. You see, to give you the first two values in this iterable. That's for that. The same way, similarly, you can loop through, you can iterate through strings. Let me just create a test string called airplane. You can choose to iterate through this using the same iter. And you can store this into my variable, just into a dummy variable, and then you can print whatever will be the next value of that particular variable here, okay? So let me just print maybe 2 or 3. Okay, just 2. If you run it at 2, you see it gives you the first 2 letters of the word airplane, okay? Let me just print maybe the first 4. When you run it, you see it gives you AIR and P. Now, there are certain kind of objects that can be iterated upon, such as a string, as we just showed, a list, set, dictionary. But you cannot actually iterate through an integer. Let's give an example. Maybe you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now, let's even use a basic for loop and see what we get. For x in this integer, okay, now let me my integer, so my integer for x in my integer, okay, print x. So let's try to run this. You see, so it says integer object is not an iterable. Now this is using a for loop. What if you declared the same integer here and you said you wanted to use the iterable of this integer? Run it, you see it gives you the same error message which says integer object is not iterable. So if you actually want to iterate through an integer, the way you do that is, let me use the same for loop for a. Now what we do here is, this is an integer, right? First thing is this. Let us try to first convert this integer into a string. Okay, now we can say for a in this, for A in this particular string. So this A now, what do? We convert this A into an integer. Okay. And all of this, we save it into a list. All right. And that list, we can give it a dummy, a variable name called my list. So what we're doing here is we're saying integer of A for A in string of my string, my integer. So my integer is all of this. So my integer is this. So first thing we're doing is we're converting this my integer into a string. Okay. So when we convert it into a string, then we'll now run a for loop for A in that string. Then whatever the value of A is, we'll convert it into an integer. All right. Now that we've converted it into an integer, you can now run a for loop for X in my list, print X. If you run it, so you see, it gives you all the values. Similarly, you can do the same thing. Let me just borrow from the top. Now we want to do the same thing, but using the iteration method. Okay. So iter my list, and let's save the value in my variable one. Just a dummy, any variable name works. So we converted it to an iterable. And now what do? We can just print right ahead, print whatever the next value of this attribute will be. So let's just print maybe, now you see the difference between the two is here. I have to actually begin to put a next method for each line I want. So if we do that, okay, let me add two more next. So it has printed everything down to number 9, which is the last. But if I should add one more next, one more next and print, you see, you get a stop iteration, meaning that we've gotten to the end of that point, okay, to the end of the list itself, as it were, because my list here actually has become a list. If you see what I mean, let me just run this. So you see my list has become a list. So we've gotten to the end of that list. Okay. Now let us create our own iterable. Okay. Let's just say an example, we want to count from 1 up to maybe 9 or so. Let's see, how do we do that? Creating our own iterable. Now, remember, if we're creating an object, right, we want to iterate through the object. One way we can do that is by creating a class, all right? Let's say a class called count, all right? Now, let's not forget our basic init function, which should go with the self, okay? Now, if you've not fully gotten what I'm talking about in Python class, you might need to refer to the video where we talk about Python class on this same tutorial series, okay? So here we have, we define the init function, and then we go with self, and then we can come in and say self.number. Let's just start from number 1, okay? Let's start from 1, okay? So that's for the init. Now let's define the iteration itself. Let's just keep this simple. Return self. Missed out something here. So return self. So here, let's define next. What should next be, by the way? What should next be? Let's do something here. Let's give a value, and let's call that value self number. Okay. And here we can say self.num. Now we are running an incremental function here. Return, then we'll return value. Okay. Now, if you notice here, we're returning an incremental function. We've talked about this in an earlier video. You can go and refer to Python operators video on this same tutorial series. So here, what we're doing here is we're saying self is equals to self.num plus 1. Okay. Now, here we have created a class. Okay, so just running it to check for errors. Now let's create an object of this class, and then we can iterate through this. Now, object class, we can call it any variable name, but the object of the class will be count. So there we go, created an object of the class. So now, first thing we want to do here is to run the iter on this. All right, so let's store is in a variable name. Okay, so now we can run a print for next on this same variable name. And let me just do a lot of this. And when you run it, you see, you get up to 7. Okay, if I want to add 2 more, you see, get up to 9. Get up to 10, and you can just keep on running it infinitely. All right, but we can just see this we've written here. We can choose to modify this just a little bit. Yeah, because really we don't want this to just start counting infinitely. What we could also do here, we could run an if statement. We could say if this self.number or self.num, let's say it is less than or equal to 2. Okay, let me run all that code been writing here, and let's see. Now, what's going to happen to our response? You see, first of all, what we've said here is if this is less than or equal to 2, you should run this code, right? So if you observe, it kept on printing the iterables, printing it from 1, 2. When it got to the third one, it said none. Let me adjust this value a little so you see what I'm saying. Let me make this one 7. Run it. So it's going to print until it gets to 7, but from 8, it begins to show you a none, right? So one other thing you could do here is to say you could add an else. Else you could raise an exception. What kind of exception is that? Stop iteration exception. Okay, so when you run this, see, it's expected to run up to 7. Then from the 7th, see, to run up to 7, then it will now raise this exception, stop iteration exception. Okay, so that's it for this short tutorial on Python iterators. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you've not already subscribed, so that you can always get more content, and hit the bell notification and comment on this video. Until the next video, bye.